Good morning. Can I hear? Nobody speaking. Yeah, you can hear me. I guess that's...
Yes, we hear you, Dr. Nick. Thank you. Sorry for the drama. Don't know why Zoom has added a password without us asking, but there you go.
Well, not a big drama as dramas go. Okay, so good morning. I said that already. Let's do a couple of minutes of meditation on the breath, just to kind of center our mind. I guess a bunch of you have been meditating already. So let's generate bodhicitta motivation for this morning's session. Think the purpose of my life is to lead all sentient beings from suffering to enlightenment. In order to do that, first I have to reach enlightenment myself. Reaching enlightenment depends on studying, practicing, and accomplishing the entire path to enlightenment. Therefore, I'm going to participate in this session on Lama Tsongkhapa's glance meditation on the entire path to enlightenment, the foundation of all good qualities, as explained by the great Lama Khunu Rinpoche, in order to reach enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. Okay, thank you very much. So last week we spent most of the time, I spent most of the time in preamble, but I'm just it was a little all over the place, so I'll just summarize it by looking at this outline. I think Rebecca sent out the link to this outline to Path Enlightenment. This is actually the introduction to this book, Teachings from Tibet. Contains, it's a collection of teachings, many of which were given at Tushita Meditation Center in Delhi around 80, 81. With a few other things thrown in, such as Gongchen Rinpoche's advice on guru practice that was given at Kopan, and a couple of teachings by Khunu Lama Rinpoche, which were given in Kathmandu, one of which is the what we're looking at this morning, his commentary on Foundation of All Good Qualities. So there are two kinds of beings with mind, Buddhas and sentient beings. Buddhas were once sentient beings, but through engaging in and completing the practice of Dharma, they fully purified their minds of both gross and subtle obscurations and attained enlightenment or Buddhahood. Two kinds of beings with mind. There are also two kinds of sentient beings, those beyond cyclic existence and those within. Those beyond cyclic existence have purified their minds of gross obscurations, but not the subtle. Sentient beings within cyclic existence are suffering from both levels of obscuration and are under the control of disturbing negative minds, delusions, and their imprints on the consciousness, karma. The mind or consciousness is formless, just like empty space. It has no shape or color. But unlike empty space, this formless mind also has the property of awareness, the ability to perceive objects. Additionally, the mind is impermanent, that is, changing from moment to moment. All impermanent phenomena are the products of causes, thus so is the mind. It does not arise from nothing. Furthermore, since effects must be similar in nature to their principal causes, the principal cause of the mind must also be a formless entity able to perceive objects and not some material substance such as the brain. In other words, the mind proceeds from a previous state of mind. Each thought moment is preceded by a prior thought moment, and there has never been a first. Moreover, each being's mind comes from its own previous continuity and not from another mind, such as some cosmic consciousness or the minds of one's parents. Hence, each individual's mind is beginningless. And just as physical energy never goes out of existence, disappearing into nothingness, so too does mental energy continue forever, only its state changes. So, its state changes, meaning we're in different realms, different samsaric realms, until we get out. So that's something that took me like an hour to say last time. And there was that did prompt a few questions somebody emailed to me. And I think, sorry. If the mind is beginningless, why is it the result of causes? There's no first cause in Buddhism, is there? Well, there are a bunch of questions. Is not a Buddha in complete control of her mind? Yes, she is. Wouldn't a mind that is impermanent have to transmigrate? So I think we mentioned the two kinds of impermanence, gross impermanence, that, like things we see changing around us, like the seasons, summer, autumn, winter, spring, or, houses getting old and falling apart, our bodies getting old and falling apart, gross impermanence. And then there's subtle impermanence, which we can't see with our senses, but we can figure out, that when a house falls apart, it doesn't usually fall apart like in one day. It's a gradual process, and if you really look into that process in minute detail, you'll see that physical objects are made of atoms and molecules. That even within the atom, there's nothing that's really solid. Everything is constantly changing. So even in that way, it's physical matter is impermanent when you look at it in detail. And so is the mind impermanent. We just have to look into our own mind. And a good way to get a sense of this impermanent, continual nature of the mind is to meditate on mental continuity by, doing what we normally do. And we sit quietly and focus on our breath. Then we turn further inward and try to find our mind and see what it is. And then if you look at the mind, at your mind at the moment, and think, well, where did it come from? you can see that this moment's mind came from the previous moment's mind, and that previous moment's mind came from its previous moment, and so on back. And today's mind came from yesterday's mind. And we can see that pretty clearly. And yesterday's mind came from last week's mind. And last week's mind came from last month's mind. And last month's mind came from last year's mind. So you can go back and back. And, you know, the fact that we can remember, you know, a lot of milestones along our own mind's history, our own life's history, shows not only that our mind is kind of continuous like that, it is, you know, a mind stream or a stream of consciousness, but it's also ours. It's, you know, we don't have anybody else's memories, and nobody else has our memories. So then if you go back and back to the first thing you remember, first thing I remember is my mother bringing my young brother home from hospital. That was pretty traumatic for me. I was I was nearly 4. But I don't really remember anything really before that. But I know I existed because I've seen pictures. And anyway, it makes sense. So if we practice this meditation, not only does it help give us a feel for, you know, the continuity of our own consciousness, our own discrete mind stream, but we can actually go further and further back. You know, the reason I harp on about all this stuff is that for me, you know, well, I mean, for anybody, Buddhism, without reincarnation, without previous lives, without mental continuity, without future lives, you know, I mean, none of it makes sense. So I think that's the first thing we have to come to grips with. And in Lama Zopa Rinpoche's Lamrim textbook that we used to use in the early Kopan courses, which you can find online, the Wish-Fulfilling Golden Sun of the Mahayana Thought Training. The very first topic was the mind is beginningless. And whereas that's kind of taken for granted in a lot of Eastern countries, in Tibet and India and, you know, countries that have a long history of this kind of philosophy. For Westerners, it's not taken for granted at all. In fact, it's probably ridiculed. It is ridiculed. I don't know if I told you or some other people, you know, you've heard of this Mind and Life Institute that His Holiness the Dalai Lama has been involved with since the mid-80s, where His Holiness has these meetings with different scientists from different disciplines, you know, whether it's astronomy or philosophy or neurobiology or, you know, just about chemistry. I mean, anything you can think of at this point, they've had these meetings with His Holiness and some Western Buddhist scholars, and then these different academics, professors and so on. And one of the early participants was Alan Wallace. I think many of you have heard of Alan Wallace. He's a really brilliant guy. So he you know, I asked him once, have I told you this story? I asked him once, after these meetings have been going on for several years, why aren't the Buddhists talking about mental continuity to these scientists, you know? Why is that sort of a taboo topic, it seemed to me? And he said, well, it's so kind of, in academic circles, it's so kind of twilight zone that, he didn't say twilight zone, but it's so anathema that academics could have their careers, you know, impaired, if not ruined, if they really took it on board and were seen discussing it seriously at this kind of meeting. So the Buddhists kindly avoid bringing that up, which seemed ridiculous to me. If this is supposed to be rigid, you know, scientific inquiry, you should be able to bring up anything and look at it and prove it or disprove it. That's what it's all about, it seems to me. But anyway, be that as it may, I still don't think after what is it, more than 35 years of these meetings, they've still discussed it. I'm not sure. But anyway, I don't think so. And Alan dropped out of those meetings some time ago. I don't think because of that, but you know. So you know, so the question comes, is there mental continuity or not? Are there past and future lives or not? And what we should look at is, how do we know if something's true or not? So generally speaking, there are three ways that we can know if something's true. First is through personal experience. The second is, and His Holiness calls that, you know, those sort of overt or obvious phenomena that we can know from personal experience, you know. Then things that are not knowable through personal experience, we can understand to be true through logical deduction. You know, the sort of where there's smoke, there's fire kind of idea. And where something, so the first overt phenomena, the second are slightly hidden phenomena. So those are the ones we determine whether they're true or not through logical deduction. And then there are very hidden phenomena, or so we can only know those to be true through reliable authority. To know from somebody who has done the work to investigate it and perhaps have personal experience of it. And, you know, we rely on that sort of thing a lot, you know, when we take medicines or when we fly in an aeroplane, or, I mean, so many different things in our life, we take others' assurances that it's safe to do because they know, and we trust them as reliable authorities. So in this case, the reliable authority is the Buddha. So he taught past and future lives. He taught these different realms of existence. So what we have to determine is the Buddha a reliable authority? You know, how did he come to derive his knowledge? So we look at the life of the Buddha, and then we look at his other teachings that we can understand. And, you know, His Holiness has said, you know, in a way, the most profound teaching of the Buddha, you know, the teaching that liberates us, is the teaching on emptiness, ultimate reality. And the teaching on conventional reality is karma. And that's, in a way, not such a profound teaching. But emptiness can be proven through logical deduction. You know, the most profound teaching can be proven through logical deduction by studying the teachings on emptiness and, you know, understanding what things are empty of, you know, what is the object of negation and so forth. And the conventional teaching on conventional reality, karma, can't be proven through logical deduction. It can make sense at a certain level, but it can't really be proven. So His Holiness said that often it can be good to begin introducing people to Buddhist philosophy by teaching emptiness, which can be, which has, you know, logical reasoning behind it. And so if people come to understand through logic that the Buddha's teaching on emptiness is correct, they can have faith in the Buddha's teaching, you know, understanding that, well, if he's right about this most profound subject, why would he be wrong about other subjects which are less profound? So in that way, we can accept Buddha as a reliable authority on these, you know, very hidden phenomena. Anyway, so the reason we can't, what can I say? The reason that past and future lives remain a hidden phenomena for us, now, and you know, as I just read that brief couple of paragraphs there is a way to think about and prove past and future lives or mental continuity logically. So in that sense, it can be a slightly hidden phenomenon, but it remains a hidden phenomenon because it remains not an overt phenomenon to us, because our minds are, you know, totally scrambled. And you know, if we try to even think, well, what's everything I thought today? You know, the day is young. We've had so many thoughts. We can't remember what they all were, but we had them. So our memory is not that good, even our short-term memory. So, and the reason is that our, well, if you think of a lake in a storm, so there's this crazy wild thunderstorm going on, and you know, branches are falling and leaves are falling, and the water in the lake is getting whipped up, and there's a frothy foam on top, and all the mud is stirred up, and the water is totally opaque. So you look into it, into that lake, and you can't see a thing below the surface. So then the storm subsides and the wind stops, and you know, things stop falling into the lake, and gradually, you know, all the froth and bubble disappears, and then the mud sinks to the bottom, and after a while the lake becomes very calm and clear. So our minds are like, at the moment, our minds are like that lake in the storm, you know, and the wind is the, you know, all our desires and past, you know, memories of the past and projections of the future, and, you know, irritation and anger and all these different delusions that are running rampant in our mind, whipping it up so that, it, you know, even when we try to focus on our breath, for half a minute, we can't really do that. So the solution is to stop agitating our mind. So that's why the first Buddhist practice is discipline or conduct. Stop creating negative karma. Don't follow the 10 non-virtuous actions, things like that. Take precepts, not to do certain actions. So it begins with that. So you can liken that to sort of calming down the storm. So on that basis, if we then meditate, try to focus our mind on the breath, for example, then, these delusions start to have less effect. As our mind becomes more focused on a single point, these other things kind of go away, fade away. I mean, not overnight, but, it takes a little while, but that's what's happening. So then our mind becomes calmer and clearer. And like the lake, we can see deeper and deeper into it. So the meditators who've achieved single point of concentration explain that when that happens, their memories improve vastly and they can see further and further into this life. And then gradually you can actually see your mind in your mother's womb and then go back into previous lives. So, the best way to know if something's true is through personal experience. It's like, when you've been away and you come home, when you're driving in your neighborhood, you know which street to go down, and when you get to your house, you know which one it is. Nobody has to tell you. It's personal experience. You know where the key is. When you go in the door, you know what you're going to find. Hopefully. So that's personal experience, and no matter what anybody tells you, you've never been here before. You have. So, we're quite a long way from having that experience, I should think. So, we have to rely on logical deduction, understanding the nature of the mind as being, formless, having ability to perceive objects. That is the mind's essential nature. Its principal cause has to be of similar nature. So, in other words, the principal cause of the mind has to be another mind, not somebody else's mind, but one's own previous state of mind. And the principal cause of that was the state of mind, was the mind before that. And so if you go back, we have to come to the conclusion that our mind has continued from a previous life's mind. So even if we're not fully convinced through that, it should be enough to, if we want to have the experience, to have enough faith that if we develop single point of concentration and that incredible clarity of mind and the incredible clarity of mind that brings, we'll be able to remember our previous lives. And that was what the Buddha himself taught. And then we have the Jataka tales, the stories of the Buddha's previous lives. How many are there? 550 or there are a lot anyway, where he took different forms in different lives as a bodhisattva. So those are in the Jataka tales. Okay, anyway, I think maybe that's enough on that. Let's Let's hit this text. So I think I read Khunu Lama's preamble to the actual teaching, the verse-by-verse commentary. So if you don't remember that, or if I didn't, you have the link to this commentary online. Rebecca sent it out and can send it again. This is what we're doing. So, you know, Khunu Lama was this great bodhisattva, very interesting life story. I didn't send you the link to that, but I can if you're interested. But, you know, he's well known as a teacher of His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. He taught His Holiness Shantideva's text to guide the Bodhisattva's way of life. And he wrote a text called A Precious Lamp, you know, verses in praise of bodhicitta. And that's been published by Wisdom. Vast as the heavens, deep as the sea, verses in praise of bodhicitta. So if we haven't sent the link to that, Rebecca will send it. But in the early days at Kopan, Lama Zopa Rinpoche would start the day, the morning discourse, with a quotation from Shantideva's Guide to Bodhisattva's Way of Life, or a quotation or a verse from you know, Khunu Lama Rinpoche's book, and verses in praise of bodhicitta. And then he would give a short commentary on the verse that he quoted, and use that as the way for us to generate bodhicitta as the motivation for the day's teachings and other, you know, meditations and so forth. So actually we're in the process of putting together a book of those verses and Rinpoche's explanations of them. So that probably be ready sometime, you know, by the middle of next year, if not earlier. So a very important teacher, and as I said, you know, he came to Nepal in 1975 for a brief visit, and Lama Zopa Rinpoche kindly took us monks and nuns and a couple of lay hangers-on down to where Khunu Lama Rinpoche was staying at Boudhanath, and he gave us this teaching on the foundation of all good qualities. And he also gave us a teaching, which is also in this book, in Teachings from Tibet, commentary on Atisha's Lamp for the Path, you know, the very first Lamrim text. So, you know, maybe, you know, who knows, maybe we could go through that one day too. So Khunu Lama Rinpoche said that this short text by Lama Tsongkhapa that we're going to talk about here, the foundation of all good qualities, is rooted in the Madhyamaka teachings, and it is therefore very important that you understand it. So the first verse reads, "The foundation of all good qualities is the kind and venerable Guru." Do you have this? You can look at it if you have. Correct devotion to him is the root of the path. By clearly seeing this and applying great effort, please bless me to rely upon him with great respect. So this is a short Lamrim text written in the form of a prayer. You know, we call these short texts, there are many of them, glance meditations. So, you know, you can see the entire path at a glance. And Rinpoche always recommended that we have a bunch of these we can look at, and we read one if we read one every day, we plant the root of the entire path in our minds every day. All the important points are covered. So there's a practice that, I don't know if you guys have it, if you do it, the Rinpoche's suggested way to start the day. We used to do this at the Light of the Path retreats. Is that what they're called? Light of the Path retreats that have been held. I think, you know, there've been 6 or 7 of them, 5 or 6, run by Kadampa Center in North Carolina. So anyway, Rinpoche put together this practice called a method to transform a suffering life into happiness and enlightenment. So that contains another glance meditation on the Lam Rim. Rinpoche calls it direct meditation. I'm not quite sure how direct and glance would be synonymous, but anyway, that's another text by Losang Jimpa, and that was actually in Rinpoche's textbook, the wish-fulfilling golden sun that we used to, that the early Kopan courses were based on. And actually, at lamayeshi.com, we have the transcripts of all those early courses that Rinpoche gave, all those 1-month courses. He's given, I think there have been 52 Lamrim courses since they began in 1971. And I think more than half of them the transcripts are online now. So that's like an amazing resource of Rinpoche's Lamrim teachings. So including all these early courses where he would quote Khunu Lama Rinpoche. And I don't know if any of you met Geshe Tsulga. He was our resident teacher here in Boston from '93. And in the first 3 years, he spent some time in North Carolina and Vermont as well. But then after that, he settled in Boston in '96 and was the main teacher at Kurukula Center till he passed away about 10 years ago. He used to go down to Florida. There used to be a guy called George Chesrow in Coral Gables used to invite him down, and he had a few students in Florida. Not sure if Tupten Kunga Center had started then. I couldn't remember why I mentioned him. He had us memorize this text, The Foundation of All Good Qualities, which we did, but I've forgotten my memorization, but once I had memorized it. So the foundation of all good qualities is the kind of venerable guru, correct devotion to him as the root of the path. We went through that already last few months ago, whenever it was. So this book by Lama Zopa Rinpoche, The Heart of the Path, is the essential teaching on guru devotion. So I'm not going to spend much time on that at this point. But so, you know, why we need a guru, how to find how not to make a mistake in finding our guru, making a connection with our guru. And once we've done that, how to practice in thought and how to practice in action. So those are the essential outlines of guru practice, you know, the advantages of following a guru, the disadvantages of not following a guru, and so on. So they're all summarized in 450 pages. So as I've said before, you know, I think this is the best book I've ever read. And Lama Zopa Rinpoche has even quoted me as saying that. Not that that carries much weight, but what Khunu Lama Rinpoche says about this verse is, this verse obviously is about guru practice. All the good qualities of liberation, the boundless state, and enlightenment, the ultimate goal, depend on the guru. Therefore, it's necessary to find a perfect guru who has all the qualities explained in the Lamrim teachings. Our responsibility as disciples is to follow the guru's instructions exactly, offer service, make prostrations, and so forth. By following the perfect guru perfectly, we can receive enlightenment. If instead we follow a misleading guide, a false teacher, all we'll receive is rebirth in one of the lower realms, such as the hells. So why do we need a guru? Because we're trying to reach enlightenment and don't know what it is. The guru knows what enlightenment is. Therefore, we need to find and then follow a guru. And it's pretty clear, isn't it? Since the extremely kind and venerable guru is the foundation of all good qualities, the good qualities, liberation, and enlightenment, the first thing we must do is to find a perfectly qualified guru. Then we must follow that guru correctly by making material offerings, offering respect and service, and doing whatever else should be done. But the main thing, the most important thing, the essence of following the guru correctly is to follow the guru's instructions exactly. This text, The Foundation of All Good Qualities, although short, explains the entire graduated path, including the 6 perfections, especially the perfection of wisdom, and the necessity of entering the Vajrayana path. The next verse then explains the difficulty of receiving a perfect human rebirth. Any questions so far? You know, if you want to jump in with a question or a comment anytime, just feel free. It's not an interruption, it's part of this rich tapestry that we're weaving here together. So the next verse, understanding that the precious freedom of this rebirth is found only once is greatly meaningful and difficult to find again. Please bless me to generate the mind that unceasingly, day and night, takes its essence. You know, when Lama Tsongkhapa is saying, please bless me, you know, he's not asking God or someone to, you know, magically transplant realizations into his mind or something like that. It's, you know, of course, I don't know what Lama Tsongkhapa had in mind exactly when he said, please bless me, who he was talking to. In a way, you know, there are different ways of looking at the guru, you know. One way, the obvious way you could think of, well, he's thinking of his teacher. His main teacher was a Sakya Lama. There was no Gelug tradition before Lama Tsongkhapa. He started it. So his teachers were, you know, Sakya, Kagyu, and Nyingma, the 3 previous main traditions. And there are some other minor traditions. There's a monastery near Gyaltse called Shalu, where the great Bhutan Rinpoche headed a smaller tradition. I forgot what it's called. He was famous, Bhutan Rinpoche was famous for having written by hand the entire Tengyur. The Tengyur, you know, in the Tibetan Buddhist canon, there are, I don't know if you can you see on top of that bookshelf? some orange text up there. Anyway, one of them is the Lamrim Chenmo, the great Lamrim of Tsongkhapa, and the other is Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand in Tibetan, the Pabongpa Rinpoche's text. So in the Tibetan canon, so those texts aren't in the Tibetan canon as such. Tibetan canon has Kangyur and the Tengyur. The Kangyur is the teachings given by the Buddha himself. There are 108 volumes of that. And the Tengyur is the 227 volumes of Indian masters' commentaries on the Buddha's teachings. So over 300 big texts. And when you look at a Tibetan text, I don't know if you ever have, but there are no pictures and there are no paragraphs. It just goes on and on. It's very efficient. So quite a lot of stuff in there. And so Bhutan Rinpoche wrote out this whole thing, the Tengyur, 227 volumes by hand. And I think then they made wood blocks from that, and they printed these texts. I think there are 3 main Tibetan editions of the Tengyur. Anyway, so I'm not sure if Bhutan Rinpoche was a contemporary of Tsongkhapa or he came before or after. Anyway, so Lama Tsongkhapa, main guru was Rendawa for Sakya Lama. And in fact, we have this, do you guys do the Miksaima Prayer there at all? The 4 or 5 line verse to Lama Tsongkhapa, likening him to, Chenrezig Manjushri Vajrapani. Actually, Tsongkhapa wrote that himself for his teacher, Rendawa. But then Rendawa said, no, I'm not worthy. I'm going to change the name to you and I'm going to return this to you. So unintentionally, Lama Tsongkhapa wrote the praise to himself. So perhaps when he says, please bless me to generate the mind that unceasingly day and night takes its essence, if he's requesting blessings from his teacher, what's a blessing? A blessing is something that transforms your mind from negative to positive, turns your mind from negative to positive. So that's a blessing. So, we all need that. We all need blessings. And we get blessings in many ways, from reading things, from, study, from listening to teachings, from being with our teachers, from observing our teachers. Many different ways things can affect our mind to turn it that way. The main thing we need is devotion. And Rinpoche used to talk about opening. What we have to do is open our devotional hole, which is, I thought, quite a quaint way of expressing it. So I don't know if you did this gesture, but that's how I envisage it, sort of opening a big hole in the forehead so the blessings can pour in, And, if we visualize the Buddha before us and think that, or visualize our teacher, our root guru, in the aspect of the Buddha, or our meditational deity. You know, thinking that, you know, our teacher and the Buddha and the Buddhas of the past, present, and future, and all the meditational deities, the hundreds and hundreds of them, they're all essentially the same person, what Rinpoche once called the Guru omniscient mind. You know, the omniscient mind of the Buddha appears in these different aspects according to our karma in order to guide us on the path. So you know, throughout infinite space, you know, there are countless Buddhas and Bodhisattvas all rooting for us, wanting us to stop creating negative karma, to create more merit, to develop love and compassion and bodhicitta and quickly reach enlightenment. So there's all this energy really that we can't see, we can't feel, we don't even probably know about it. Even if we hear about it, we probably don't believe it. All this energy is coming at us from all directions, you know, but where our devotional hole is closed. So it's not getting in. So we have to open ourselves with, you know, faith and trust. But, you know, not blind faith, not blind trust. Trust based on studying the teachings and, you know, understanding the logic behind them. And so it's a discerning faith. It's a discerning trust. It's, you know, confidence based on, you know, clear understanding. So, you know, please bless me to generate the mind that unceasingly day and night takes the essence of what? Takes the essence of this perfect human rebirth. So, you know, the way the Lama Rim is set up is, you know, the first thing is, once we get into the actual teachings, is the teaching on generating guru devotion, you know, as the first thing Lama Tsongkhapa says here. It's interesting that in the very early courses when the Lamas started teaching Westerners, Lama Yeshe, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, I don't remember hearing really any teachings much on guru devotion. And if you look at those early transcripts, there wasn't much there on that, you know. And I think it's because, you know, we're all new to this and pretty cynical, and a lot of us, like me, you know, had sort of knee-jerk reaction to reject stuff that we weren't familiar with. And so if the Lama started teaching, well, the Guru is the Buddha, so he's saying, oh, I'm the Buddha, you know, and you have to make offerings to me. It's like, I don't think so. Let's go down to Goa instead. So I can't even remember exactly when Rinpoche started teaching on guru devotion more and more. Now he teaches so much. I mean, so much so that we have this big fat book. You know, you couldn't have put together a pamphlet in 1975. So, so I don't know exactly when it changed, but I think when they knew they had their hooks in us and we weren't going to go anywhere. So they said, well, okay, now it's time you guys finally learn how to practice. But as you know, as I said, until I started working on this book about, I don't know, 2006, 2007, you know, I was like 35 years into it, and it was only then that I really realized how I should have been practicing all that time. So, so this is a really important topic. So that's kind of the first thing, and then the next outline is, you know, okay, having become devoted to Guru, what next? And so what next is divided into two, teachings on exhorting yourself to extract the essence from your perfect human rebirth. And then the next part is how to extract the essence from the perfect human rebirth. So, you know, encouraging or enthusing ourselves, exhorting ourselves to take advantage of this incredible opportunity we have. And the reason we need to be, you know, pushed to do that is because we're lazy, and we're the strongest mental factor in our mind is probably attachment, you know. So, you know, we're attached to so many things, you know, the happiness of this life, and that comes from, you know, not understanding the past and future lives, that this life is only a blip, and you know, this idea that you only live once, and you know, the purpose of life is to have a good time. I mean, you know, things like that. So it's a path to enlightenment is a long path, and there are a lot of steps, and it can get quite steep at times. So we need a lot of energy to like fuel up our rocket to zoom along the path to enlightenment. So this is kind of rocket fuel, this teaching on perfect human rebirth. And then the next teaching after that is the teaching on impermanence and death. So it's like, so the teaching on perfect human rebirth really pumps us up to understand what, how incredibly important, how incredibly precious, how incredibly rare it is to be in the situation that we're in. It says, you know, it's found only once. Well, it's kind of a little rhetorical, because if that were true, if we hadn't had a perfect human rebirth before, we wouldn't be here now. Because it takes, you know, a lot of Dharma practice to receive a perfect human rebirth. And it needs several perfect human rebirths, previous perfect human rebirths, to get this one. But what he's saying is, it's so unusual, it's so rare that... Sorry. Do you like my Lama Yeshe laughing ringtone? You can get it. Where was I? So, you know, it's so rare that it's almost, it's as if it were received only once. It's difficult to find again. It's greatly meaningful, difficult to find again. So, so that should really pump us up, you know? And then, but the next teaching is, oh, you know, congratulations, you've got a perfect human rebirth, but you're going to die. And it's nearly over. You don't know when you're going to die. It could be tonight, if you live that long. So it's like, that's more energy that is kind of being injected into us. So, and that's what we need to persevere, to study the difficult teachings, to overcome the obstacles when meditation gets difficult, to not get overwhelmed, to know how to transform problems that inevitably arise, how to transform problems into the path, how to make, anyway. So Rinpoche, and enthusing ourselves to extract the essence from perfect human rebirth. Then the next section is, how to extract the essence from the perfect human rebirth. And as you know, that has three paths: the path of the lower capable being, the path of the middle capable being, the path of the higher capable being. So there's three levels of path depending on what you want to accomplish. So the path of the lower capable being, as Lama Zopa Rinpoche calls it, the literal translation of the Tibetan term, the path of the lower capable being, which grammatically grates a little bit, but never mind. The path of the lower capable being, or you could, if you wanted to tweak it, you could say the path of the practitioner of least capability. The goal of the practitioner, you have to practice Dharma, but if you only have a little minor goal, then this is the path for you. So what's the minor goal? The minor goal is not to be born in the lower realms, not to be born as an animal, as a hungry ghost, or in the hell realms, just to receive another upper rebirth as a human or as or one of those levels of gods. So, you need to practice Dharma, you need to create positive karma, you need to stop creating negative karma, which is the cause of lower rebirth, to achieve that result. But, for those who see that's not enough because there's no security in insecure samsara, cyclic existence, so the goal of the middle capable being or the practitioner of intermediate capability, the goal is to attain liberation from cyclic existence, to attain liberation, to become an arhat, so-called. To attain liberation, to obtain freedom for yourself alone. So forget about the others, countless billions of sentient beings, trillions, gazillions. Just as long as I'm okay, that's all that matters. So that's the path for the individual liberation. So the Mahayana practitioners, the Buddhas themselves, don't think that much of that, although that's what a lot of people, that's as much as what a lot of people are capable of. And it's a sort of a temporary goal. So that path was taught. So, but then the third path, the path of the being of greatest, the great capable being, or the path of practitioner of greatest capability, is the path that leads actually to enlightenment, and that's the one fueled by bodhicitta. That's the one we want. But in order to accomplish that path, we have to accomplish the lower two. So, there are a lot of levels, a lot of stages to pass through, a lot of stuff to learn, a lot of meditations to do, a lot of realizations to be gained. So we need a lot of fuel to keep us focused, to keep us moving forward. So that fuel comes from these meditations, these beginning meditations on perfect human rebirth and impermanence and death. And then added to that is the next teaching in the Lamrim after impermanence and death is the teaching on the lower realms, which basically says if you don't practice Dharma, you're going to hell. And this is what it's like. So that also can be, if we really understand what it's like, so in the three lower realms, by far the worst, by far the greatest suffering is in the hell realm. Less than that, but still great suffering, is the hungry ghost realm. Less than that, but still great suffering, is the animal realm. Rinpoche said, Rinpoche has said, if, a couple of things. He said, if we could have the mind of an animal, so not a hungry ghost, not a hell being, an animal, if we could have the mind of an animal for just 30 seconds, if we could experience being an animal, and we've been an animal countless times in the past since beginningless time, we just don't remember, like we don't remember the first, years of our life till our mother brought our baby brother home. So if we could experience the mind of an animal for 30 seconds, we would never sleep again, he said. Those of us who love sleep probably don't want to have that experience, but the point he's making is that we'd be so terrified of having that experience that we would just never sleep again. We'd spend all the rest of our days 24/7 practicing Dharma, purifying our past negative karma, creating positive karma, at least to be born in the upper realms. The other thing I think he said was, if we could experience having the mind of an animal for 30 seconds, we'd be so terrified we would vomit. Maybe that's easier than never sleeping again, but either way, it's kind of a terrifying understanding to have, and one that we should seek to avoid. So, on Perfect Human Rebirth, we have a book for that. The Perfect Human Rebirth, Freedom and Richness on the Path to Enlightenment. That's Rinpoche in 1975, that picture. So we chose that picture because these teachings, a lot of these teachings were from the earlier teachings Rinpoche gave. So in those early courses that went for 1 month, Rinpoche would, we'd start each day's teachings with bodhicitta. So we always got our daily dose of bodhicitta. But then in terms of the detailed commentaries, most of the time, nearly all of the time, was spent on the path of the lower capable being, teachings on perfect human rebirth, impermanence and death, lower realms, on 8 worldly dharmas, on refuge and karma. And then occasionally we would get a little bit into the intermediate path. So sometimes you may have heard these called the 3 scopes: the lower scope, middle scope, and the great scope. So Rinpoche doesn't like those translations, doesn't consider them translations, really. So I don't know who came up with that terminology, but so the intermediate level teachings like on, the 4 Noble Truths, on the 12 links, we'd get into them a little bit, but nearly the whole 1 month Kopan course was spent on the beginning teachings on, perfect human rebirth, lower realms, impermanence and death, lower realms, refuge and karma. So, the way it's set up, it's so perfect, It's like, so we're taught the perfect human rebirth to see what is this life that we have, how precious it is, how rare it is, how hard it is to find again. And then we're taught, but as good as it is, it's rapidly running out. It's nearly over. There's not much time left. And if we die now, for sure we're going to be born in the lower realms. Because up till now, all we did is create negative karma, cause for lower rebirth. And even after we met the Dharma, we spent so much time asleep, so much time, eating, so much time wasted on entertainment and so on, so forth. Very little time. Even since we met the Dharma, we've spent so little time practicing it properly. And then, so if we're born in the lower realms, there are extensive teachings on the lower realms in the Lamrim. And and if we were to die today, that's going to be our fate. So that should serve to engender in us like a positive fear. Positive fear is fear that does you good. Negative fear is fear that does you bad. So fear that does you good is something that leads you to react constructively. So as we have this understanding, I've got an incredibly rare, precious, perfect human rebirth. It's nearly over. If it were to finish soon, I'd be reborn in this horrible place. What can I do? Where can I turn? So then it's a teaching on refuge, that the way out of this situation is by taking refuge in Buddhadharma and Sangha. So the fear of suffering of cyclic existence pushes us towards the refuge. And, the teachings on refuge explain the preeminent qualities of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha to show that they are true and worthy objects of refuge. So if we have faith and confidence in them, that pulls us towards refuge. So there are these two causes for taking refuge. Fear of suffering pushing us, and faith and confidence pulling us towards. And then the third factor is the understanding that it's not just me in this situation, but all samsaric sentient beings are in this terrible situation of impermanence and death and suffering in the lower realms. So that adds to our motivation, our personal motivation for taking refuge, the pushing and the pulling. There's the compassion that I'm taking refuge for the sake of all sentient beings. So that's a Mahayana refuge, the way of Mahayana taking refuge. Take refuge in order to enlighten myself for the sole purpose of enlightening all sentient beings. So then once we've taken refuge, then what? Then our obligation is to understand and follow the law of karma. So by understanding cause and effect, what causes lead to suffering, what causes lead to happiness, stop creating causes of suffering, purify the causes of suffering that we've already created, develop the positive qualities that we have, and acquire and develop the positive qualities that we don't, then that's the way we can lead ourselves out of the, that's the way we can ensure ourselves of an upper rebirth, of avoiding the lower realms. So that's what the so-called lower scope encompasses, or the path of the lower capable being. At least we don't get reborn in the lower realms. So that's what this early teachings are about. Because if we're born in the lower realms, game over for a long time. Can't practice Dharma in the lower realms, and it's very hard to get out. We have to rely on previously created positive karma. It's like this roulette wheel that's incredibly stacked against us, just waiting for our number to come up. But there are so many billions and trillions of numbers that it's, much easier to win a big lottery than to get another perfect human rebirth. So perfect human rebirth, freedom and richness on the path to enlightenment. So everybody knows the 8 freedoms and the 10 richnesses. Who can tell me the 8 freedoms without looking it up? Any volunteers? Shall I start naming names? Feeling lucky? No volunteers? This is the very first teaching on the Lam Rim. We should know these 8 freedoms and 10 richnesses. So maybe I can sell you a book. The 8 freedoms are the 8 states from which we're free. 8 states of unfreedom. Freedom from what? Freedom from the ability to practice. We're unfree. We're not free to practice Dharma. So, there are, so we're free from being born in the hell realms. We're free from being born as a hungry ghost. We're free from being born as an animal. We're free from being born as a long life God. So we're free from those 4 non-human states of existence. There are also 4 human states of existence from which we're free. We're free from having been born at a time when the Buddha's teachings didn't exist. So in the vast can you say expanse of time? You say in the vast expanse of time, there's only a tiny fraction of time when the Buddha's teachings exist. They've been around for 2,500 years. I'm not sure how long they'll be around since. And then again, it depends on how you define the Buddha's teachings. What is the definition of the Buddhadharma being alive? So there are vast periods of time, by far. I mean, when you look at the vast expanse of time, the time the Buddhas exist is just like a fraction of a second in comparison. A few thousand years. And then, so the period where there aren't teachings is called the dark period. So there's vast period of time where there's no Buddhadharma teachings. Now there's this little window of opportunity, and soon they'll be gone. And they have to wait through another eons and eons of dark period before Maitreya comes. It's Maitreya over my shoulder. He will then manifest the next cycle of the Dharma teachings on earth. So we have the freedom from having been born in a dark period. So in this non-dark period, in this period of light, this period of existence of the Buddha's teachings, there are very few places on earth where you can find the teachings. You go back to when the Buddha appeared, just this little part of India. If you're born in Tibet then, or in China, or, Los Angeles or wherever, no Dharma teachings. So now the teachings have spread at a certain level, a little bit more, but still there are so many places where the teachings don't exist. So it's the freedom from having been born in a place where there are no Dharma teachings. Even though the teachings exist, you're born somewhere where they haven't reached. So that's no good. So we're free from that. Then there's the freedom from having been born, you know, deaf or, you know, mentally incapacitated in some way. I'm not sure what the right way to say this is these days. But, you know, there are certain physical or mental conditions that preclude us from being able to practice Dharma properly. So if you're, you know, brain damaged or something like that, it's virtually impossible to understand and practice Dharma. So we're free from that. You know, the traditional teaching says being born deaf or foolish. So deaf doesn't mean, you know, you can't read teachings, you can't understand teachings, you can lip read and so on, but there's what is missing if you're deaf is receiving the oral tradition. You know, the oral transmission that began with the Buddha himself and passed from the Buddha to his disciples, from his mouth to their ear, and then from the disciples' mouth to their disciples' ear, and so on. And this oral tradition, this lineage has passed down from the Buddha himself, from master to student, unbroken over these 2,600 years, whatever it is. So there's a certain blessing that can be received by having oral transmission. That's why you often see the Lamas doing oral transmissions of this, oral transmissions of this text, that text. Lama Zopa Rinpoche has spent so much time studying, receiving oral transmissions of different texts and different teachings from so many different masters who have received that transmission in an unbroken lineage from the Buddha himself, from their teachers. So, so if you're deaf, you cannot receive that transmission. So that's, you know, you can still understand and practice Dharma, no problem, but you can't quite do it perfectly. So we're talking about the perfect human rebirth. So we're free from being born in a dark period. We're free from being born in a place where there's no teachings. We're free from being born with these obstacles to receiving the teaching and practicing teaching properly. And then the eighth freedom is freedom from having wrong views. So we can have wrong views just because we're stubborn and arrogant. We can have wrong views from being born in a society that bans the study and practice of Dharma. We can, or in a family, or in a strict, you know, non-Buddhist religious tradition that you wouldn't even contemplate studying or practicing another religion. There's all these different things. So we're free from that too. So those are the 8 freedoms. And now you're free from having to listen to me anymore. So I think we're just slightly over time, so I better wrap up. So please, you know, have a look at this book if you have it, or Perfect Human Rebirth, in Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, or in, Lamrim Chenmo, Great Lamrim. So many teachings on Perfect Human Rebirth. Have a look at those. And we'll pick up there next week. So, as we started by generating bodhicitta, and as we've been looking at Lama Tsongkhapa and Khunu Lama Rinpoche's teaching, we've created a lot of merit. So in order to protect that merit from being destroyed by anger, wrong views, and so forth, let's dedicate it. So just, feel all this positive energy we've generated over the last hour and a half. Just redirect it to the enlightenment of all sentient beings. You think, because of this merit, may I quickly reach enlightenment for the sole purpose of enlightening all sentient beings. Okay, guys, thank you very much. Hope to see you next week.
Thanks so much, Dr. Nick. I'll send out links to all the materials that you referenced today.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
That was great teaching. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Doctor.
Nice.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Nicole.